Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by hairy, hunky, handsome homos slash insert whatever H adjective you want that puts us in a good light to discuss film and review a bit of movie news with you guys. As usual, this week I'm accompanied by my co-hosts Jim Pugliafico.
Hi, guys, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis.
Mr. Lindis, we'll see you now.
You may have guessed from our attire, Jim's leather hat, my leather harness, and Will's very, very debonair suit, shirt, and tie.
Gray tie.
Gray tie. Well, it's kind of black and white and gray.
It's 50 Shades of Grey.
It's 50 Shades of Grey.
Oh,
you stole my joke!
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you know what, though? Great minds think alike.
It's open season on jokes.
It totally is.
Yeah, and there's going to be a lot of jokes tonight, too.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yes, probably. But in addition to reviewing 50 Shades of Grey, we'll also be dishing a bit of movie news and sharing our weekly plugs. So we are happy to have you guys with us. We're going to dive right into some movie news. All right, so we do have quite a bit to talk about in tonight's movie discussion, so I'm going to be a little more abbreviated than normal with my movie news. I was very happy to see that we got some of our first official images of Daniel Craig as James Bond in the new Bond movie Spectre that hits theaters this November. Of course, James Bond is in the snowy, mountainous awesomeness of James Bondness. Something. Mm-hmm. But it's got me very excited. I was a huge fan of Skyfall. We'll miss Judi Dench, but I'm very, very, very pumped for Spectre. Are you guys looking forward to this one at all?
Yeah, I mean, I like Skyfall, and I don't know if I'm super excited about the next Bond movie, Spectre. I see a lot of buzz about it, but yeah, I mean, I guess I'm looking forward to it. I'm just not super pumped. I'm not a huge Bond fan. We still have to maybe if we finally start getting through our Bond 50 box set of all the Bond movies, then maybe I'll get more excited. But
it's going to have to wait till we make it through all the Godzilla movies.
That's right. All the Godzilla movies will come first, and because we're about halfway through those, so we're moving right along. Yeah.
So who would win, like James Bond versus Godzilla? Obviously Godzilla, right?
Godzilla, yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't even matter like which Godzilla it is, like whether it's the like really scary, formidable Godzilla or the kind of goofy Monster Island Godzilla. It doesn't really matter.
It doesn't even matter how many.
It just smacked the fuck out of James
Bond has, right? Yeah. I'm sort of middle ground excited. I like Daniel Craig as James Bond, so I like seeing him in these things. James Bond movies I like to think of them as like a reliable friend. I like the fact that they're kind of steadily coming out, so every time I start to forget about James Bond, there's another one I can go check out, and it's cool, So I'm good for it. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited too. It hits theaters this coming November, a month before Star Wars, so 2 months in a row for my excitement level. I'm jazzed. Will, what have you got this week?
Fairly short one as well. I think that might be the order for the day of
news anyway.
Yeah, at least for the news. We're going to draw it out. We're going to extend our pain and pleasure in the film review section. But no, my news item actually has to do with the Breakfast Club. No, I'm not talking about a film that came out 30 years ago. I'm talking about the anniversary of a film that came out 30 years ago. Specifically, so we just hit the 30-year anniversary of the John Hughes classic. And as part of this anniversary, Fathom Events is putting out a series of re-releases in some of their in some theaters nationwide. This is going to be on Thursday, March 26th, and Tuesday, March 31st. Both showings are at 7:30 local time in 440 different movie theaters across the country. So if you're at all interested in seeing Breakfast Club in the theaters, if you didn't get a chance to see it before, or if you just really enjoyed the movie and want to kick it with some of your friends at the theater, check it out. You can go to the Fathom Events website, and it'll show you all the different participating theaters. I'm seeing tons of them in tons of different areas. Another thing of note about this is going to be a newly restored version of the movie. And anyone that goes to it will get to view an exclusive featurette with interviews with the cast members and interviews with other teen movie filmmakers like Diablo Cody and Amy Heckerling. So that accompanies the film. And if you don't get a chance to check it out in theaters, there is an anniversary Blu-ray and DVD which is coming out on March 10th that also has that that special edition version. So Breakfast Club is coming, and if you're looking for something to do, March 26th, March 31st, I say check it out.
Well, I never really got much into the Breakfast Club. Of course, I've seen it. I know what it is. I know it kick-started the careers of a lot of that pack of young actors. Are you like a huge fan of Breakfast Club?
Yeah, it's hard. I wouldn't say I'm like a huge fan, but I'm definitely a fan of it.
Cool.
I don't have any posters up on the wall, but I love the idea that this was a teen movie that we got to see several different people from several different cliques or several different groups. And to me, when you think about high school movies, usually it's a bunch of stoners chasing after the one cheerleader girl, or a couple of jocks fighting over the one cheerleader girl. And this is the film that really gave us, it wasn't maybe the first, and it certainly hasn't been the last, but it's probably one of the most iconic ones to showcase all of the different groups, or at least some of the major ones that you'd see in a high school setting. And for that, it's very memorable to me.
So speaking of Breakfast Club, do you want to see like a whole lot of hotness, Breakfast Clubbishness?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
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 Check it.
Yeah, it is a Breakfast Club right there.
Yep, that was from this summer when we were. Was it Convergence? Yeah, it was Convergence. Went to the Breakfast Club in Phoenix.
Yeah,
that's
look at
awesome.
Look at those hot bears giving their whole mind.
Don't you?
Yeah.
Yes, totally. So, I'm excited. I love The Breakfast Club. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and I'm really looking forward to that. So, awesome news bit. Thank you, Will. Jim, what have you got? I think there's a comment as well, if you want to read that there.
Yeah, let me get into the news bit, and then we do have a comment from Steve from Sacramento Movie Bears that we'll get to right after that. My news bit is also pretty short, sticking to the theme of the night for news so far. If you're out there and you're a fan of the movie that we reviewed on the show sometime over the summer called Interstellar, this little movie that came out, Christopher Nolan joint that came out over the summer. If you didn't get maybe you didn't get a chance to see it on the big screen yet, you missed the run, or you saw the movie but said, "Fuck, that was awesome. I bet it'd be even awesomer if I saw it on a big, huge IMAX screen." Well, now you have your chance. This Saturday, that's February 21st, if you're listening to the show before that date, they've decided to give a one-day re-release of Interstellar only in IMAX screens around the country. And not, we're talking IMAX and kind of the fake IMAX ones too, of which there's one up here in Tucson. Limax, right. Where they're going to...
they're lying.
Maybe just have one or two showtimes on Saturday for people who want to see Interstellar again on the big screen. So that's it. That's my movie news. I know, I don't know if we'll have time to go see it. We've got a busy weekend coming up with our big Oscar party, so that's gonna be a tough one. Plus, I think we saw Interstellar on a pretty big screen, if I remember.
We did. Yeah, we did.
So yeah, but
the Fault in Our Stars.
That's right, Fault in Our Stars. So yes, Interstellar. So I mentioned we have a comment from a good friend of ours, Steve or Bubba from the Sacramento Movie Bears. Steve says, "I love that Jim just happens to have a leather dude cap around to use as a prop." I'm sure he borrowed it from, quote, a friend, unquote. And Brad's bitch harness is old news to MBP listeners. Props for the bear colors on Brad's harness. Steve, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. I actually did borrow this from a friend. Actually, I'm not sure I borrowed it or he just left it.
He left it behind.
Oh,
that's right.
Wow.
At the bar, though, not at our house.
He
sure.
left this at a bar, and we were there to pick it up for him, and have never gotten it back. So it's become our prop. So it's I don't know. I've got this. This is not the only bit of leather that I own. The only other piece of leather I own is a wrist strap. That's it. I think that's it, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, for me. I mean, Brad's got that bitchin' harness, so.
That's a less exciting story than I was hoping for. I was hoping that story ended with you going to Craigslist and doing a missed connection, trying to find the guy, the random dude that left the leather cap at the house.
Oh my God, we should do a bear version of Cinderella, where if the cap fits.
Yeah.
Cinderella.
Right. If the butt plug fits.
Oh
there we
God.
go. That's the much more disturbing version.
Or something else Will may have in his possession.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, here it is.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Figured I needed to bring a prop to this episode as well, so I came swinging.
I tell you what, guys, if you are watching on YouTube, you're getting the full effect tonight. If you're not, well, it's awesome that you're listening on iTunes.
Big.
But
it's so big.
Wow. That's so thick. I heard that in a porn today, but
I don't know what you think you're going to do with that, Will, but it ain't. But
it's used for self-defense. Someone breaks into the house in the middle of the podcast.
Wow. Oh my God. Oh boy. Oh boy. Well, before we move into our movie, I just wanted to wish we wanted to wish a very, very happy birthday to longtime listener Paul Alderete in Austin, Texas. Paul, we will be there in just a few weeks. We'll have to buy you a drink or something belatedly for your birthday. But, San Antonio, Texas. Did I say Austin? Whatever. Did he move?
No, he lives in San Antonio. He's just in Austin quite a bit.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I'm like, every time okay. Well, anyway, whatever. Birthday drink on us when we see you. 3 weeks. Be there or be square. Anyway, are you guys ready to move on to our review of the week?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, this one's going to be fun.
Oh, boy. Here we go. Our discussion of 50 Shades of Grey. Okay, so just to preface this, we do have quite a few of you hanging out with us tonight on the Google Hangout, so that's awesome. Thank you for being here. Don't forget, share your thoughts, and we'll be happy to share those on air as long as they are air appropriate. But we're going to talk about this movie spoiler-free for a little while first. There's a lot of controversy around this film, so we'll probably talk about that too. And I think Will and I may even talk a little bit about our experience trying to read this book. But for those of you who are curious about the movie and have not seen it yet, feel free to stay for about half an hour or so as we talk through all this, and then we'll give fair warning before we move into spoilers. And if you care about being spoiled, that'll be your cue to step away. Otherwise, you can keep hanging out with us. But Will, why don't we kick this off a little bit first by talking a bit about trying to read this book? What do you think?
I think trying is the key qualifier there.
Yeah, definitely. So I thought I would take one for the team and be the one guy, since I couldn't find one single girl willing to come on the show who was going to see the movie after reading the book. I thought, well, I'll read the book. I'm sure it's like 250 pages. No, it's 512 motherfucking pages. And I got about
book one. That's just book one of three.
That's book one. One of three. Mm-hmm. And I got about 33.339% into the book, and I couldn't do anymore. One of the most horribly written pieces of literature that I have ever read. Like, seriously, she uses the words, oh my, like 172 times in this book. Like, Oh, Christian Grey was wearing a suit with a gray tie. Oh my. Then he walked into the office room and looked at me. Oh my. Ugh.
I
Good
was
God.
literally wondering if George Takei had sponsored the writing of this book because oh my shows up all the time. Yeah, it's not a
He
very
gets a
well.
royalty for everyone.
Yeah, every time he says it, he gets $100. So he's banking. Yeah, it's not a very well written book. I made it. I didn't make it as far as you did, Brad. Somewhere around, I forget the exact place where I left off, but I'm maybe 60, 70 pages in, which is, I admit, fairly unfair. I'm judging an entire 512-page piece of work based off of the first, tenth of the book. But yeah, it's just not very well written. The sentence structure is awkward and clumsy. The dialogue is fucking atrocious. It is hard to read. That said, here's my big butt on this.
But
Yeah, throw in. Yeah, leave it. I'm going to leave a pause there for any sound effects might be thrown in post. No, I have had a chance to talk to some of my female friends who have read the book and who enjoyed the book, and I asked them about that. Like, how can you read this knowing that it's like you get that it's like poorly written, right? And what they've let me know, and it made a lot more sense when I thought about it in this context. It's like, you don't read 50 Shades of Grey because you're wanting to read good literature. If you want to read good literature, you read good literature. You read 50 Shades of Grey because you want to read a pulpy romance novel. The same way that, like, if you read like a pulpy detective noir type film or a book, those are usually very like by the book, and they all follow the exact same pattern.
They can be stylized in a certain way too.
Some can be stylized, and some can become literature, just like some romance can become fine literature. But a lot of them are kind of dime store, very garden variety. Same thing, and Brad, this is one where we can, share common ground. As comic book fans, like a lot of what we do when we pick up our, there are some graphic novels and some comic books that are legitimate literature, but a lot of them are just, pay your few bucks, flip through the pages, and read your kind of like pulpy action. So this is like girls who enjoy, and men as well, who enjoy romance as a genre. This is their version of like me reading Spider-Man and X-Men. So when I think about that, it makes me at least appreciate why someone would enjoy this, even if it is, extremely poorly written.
I found it interesting, and I don't know if you got into any of the sex stuff, Will, but I found it interesting, like how the book like describes things that are happening, like he pressed his engorgement against my belly, or he massaged my supple mounds upon my chest. It's very like, it's sexy without, I guess, being overtly sexual. I don't know. Maybe that changes later in the book. I don't know. But she's throwing around terms like
It's not like reading. It's not like reading Penthouse Forum then.
No. In fact, she's like, oh, I could, see the outline of his erection, and I'm like back in health class in 9th grade, like, So.
And that's part of why it's poorly written. Like, not only is the dialogue bad, the sentence structure bad, but a lot of the word choice for an erotic novel just doesn't do it. And part of it's because you can't just say, you can't just use the word dick over and over and over again. Like, she grabs his dick, and then he touched at some point you have to open up the thesaurus and try to find other words for it. But I don't think that she chose appropriate ones. The outline of your erection, like, that is not a sexy sentence.
Yeah, and like you guys, I don't read any of this like erotic fiction or this pulp romance novels that get kind of steamy, but I do get the sense that that's part of the genre, that they kind of talk in and around the sex act, with by using more descriptive language as opposed to just let's get to it and talk about putting my thing in your thing,
in your ... down there.
down there.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's part of it too. Like you have to know your target audience. Like, if you're the, when we think about 50 Shades of Grey, kind of the joke or the the what we immediately think of is like the housewife reading it kind of at night while her husband's sleep, having these these sexual feelings reawakened in her, and she's not going to want to read a sentence that says, he bent her over the table and jackhammered her. She's going to want to read. She's going to want to read.
I would read that.
Well, see, that might be more, for a certain audience, like maybe our audience, but maybe not as much. Like you're going to have some more descriptive words. You're going to try to describe around the situation. Right. Speaking of describing around the situation, we've got a comment here from Mick Jones from DC. He says, giggling at supple mounds. And yeah, so are we.
Well, I will say, even with my negative experience reading the book, as far as I got, I kept an open mind going into the movie because it is kind of its own right. Will, maybe you can talk a little bit while you set the film up, just about does the movie really set itself apart from what you were able to read, and did that work for you or not?
Yeah. So first of all, the short and fast version of this of the synopsis. So this is based on that wildly successful romance novel by E.L. James, 50 Shades of Grey, and it tells the story of Anastasia Steele. She's this innocent English lit major who interviews the enigmatic and handsome businessman Christian Grey. As the two draw closer and closer to one another, Anastasia is drawn into this world of like heightened and vivid sexuality and flogging and butt plugs. Again, I do this with the full disclaimer, put the sticker on it. Not only am I not the target audience for this, not only is this not my wheelhouse, but I've only read a portion of the book. I'm going to try to finish it up this week. It's actually quite a breezy read, so it's not too bad as far as 512 pages go.
Easy breezy, beautiful Anastasia Steele.
Oh my gosh! But in terms of how it compares, I guess the headline for me is, while it is still not a good movie, I wouldn't say I enjoyed this movie. I still think it was leaps and bounds better than its source material. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that I think everyone that was involved with this film realized kind of what pardon me if there's any fans of the book reading this, but what a turd the book is, and they polished it as best they could. And you can polish and polish and polish a turd. It's still going to be a turd, but they still tried so damn hard.
The more you polish a turd, the more you see the corn inside.
Oh my God. That is actually the
classic.
That's sexier than some of the lines in the
book.
Oh my God. So the lead here, Dakota Johnson, I think was the bright spot in the film for me. She really tried hard to make this what I considered to be clunky dialogue that stayed in the film, that did it translated from the book to the film, the dialogue being pretty bad. She tried to make it work as best as possible. She balanced the humor, the emotional weight, the sexuality, and the vulnerability that this, as well as the script would allow. Jamie Dornan tried as well. I don't know if, for me, he was possessing of enough charisma to really make me care about his character as much. But whenever he was interacting with Dakota, and that was quite a bit because this is a film about these two and their relationship, I will say that she brought out some of the better qualities of him. So kudos to her. I also was a big fan of the cinematography. We have director Sam Taylor Johnson and cinematographer Seamus McGarvey. They added a lot of texture and depth to their shots. Some of the scenes were extremely well framed, way more professionally so than really this material deserved to have. So for me, I thought that what I saw on screen was way better than what I was visualizing while reading the book.
So that turd was really well polished.
It was really well polished. The problem with it was, to me, if it was one huge thing, I mentioned it before, the dialogue was really bad. You've got lines like, I don't make love, I fuck. Hard.
I liked that line.
That was a good line, I thought.
Really?
I liked it. I thought that was pretty awesome. I'm like, whoa, that's
didn't do it for me. I'm 50 Shades of fucked up.
That was groan-worthy. Yeah.
Later's Baby, repeated all throughout the film.
Twice at least.
That was what made me eye roll. And the one that really bothered me, and this isn't spoilers. At one point, Anastasia asked the question, "What are butt plugs?" Now, the problem I had with this, yes, that's an innocent enough statement. She's an English lit major. The item is called a butt plug. I think it's somewhere in one of her literature courses she should have learned what context clues were. It's probably a plug for your butt, right?
Probably.
So I thought that was a really inane line, and I really wish he just had looked at her and said, "What the hell do you think it means?" Like, or something like that. Played off. Yeah.
In her defense, when I was in college and I was still shiny and new and naive, I asked once upon a time, what is a butt plug? Because I honestly didn't know. I read about them online. I grew up on a farm. I mean, I figured contextually it had something to do with plugging your butt.
But obviously you think, well, why does a plug need to be in my butt? You know what I mean? Well, like, what does that have? I think what she's asking is, what does that have to do with sex?
Right, exactly. You know what is the context of a butt plug? What purpose does it actually serve? And English lit major, don't forget, plug has multiple meanings. It can be a plug that sticks into an outlet. It can be like a drain plug. I mean, there are many different
go into something, plugs. And that is the butt.
See, but the thing is that I go back to this being why the dialogue was poorly written. If the question had been like, well, why is that sexy, or how
what do you want me to do with that? Yeah.
What do you want me to do with this, or it goes where, or like kind of play off of that a little bit more, it would have worked. But the way it actually appears on screen is what is a butt plug, and that becomes kind of like probably the least effective way of asking the particular question.
Although I will guarantee you that in any theater full of people watching this movie in particular, there is a significant percentage of those people who probably have never actually heard of a butt plug.
I would agree with you. Yep.
So then in that case, explain it in the film, because they didn't. They just kind of glossed it.
No, I know. They left it. They left it. I know.
And that was my problem. Like a lot of times there were just words for the sake of being words, and a really
vaginal fisting.
That part was actually a little funny because it was just kind of used like, no, let's take off that. Let's take off that. So that was used in kind of a funny way. But I really feel like they could have just because the dialogue appeared a certain way in the source material doesn't mean that they had to use the exact quotes in the film. And to be fair, there was a lot of apparently the director and E.L. James had a lot of on-set bickering about what made it into the film and what didn't. Apparently, she pulled her weight a little bit, and he wanted to go different routes and things. So that's probably why some of the stuff translated the way it did. I just would have liked to have seen something more subtle. So, all that aside, dialogue I did not enjoy. The performances I mostly enjoyed. The cinematography I very much enjoyed. All in all, what does that work out to? It's a film I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but that doesn't matter, right? If you're a fan of the novel, you've probably already seen it. And on the off chance that you've not seen it, and you're a fan of the novel, I would say it's better. It's better than the source material, so I'd say go see it in that case. But if this isn't your cup of tea, if you're not the type of person that's really into kind of steamy romance films, I don't know that this is the one to really get you hooked. I think there is much better out there. The film Secretary with James Spader and Maggie Gyllenhaal, The Duke of Burgundy, which is in kind of limited theatrical release right now. There are other films that show sexuality and BDSM way better and explore it from a lot more interesting angles than what we saw here. So,
but are they as accessible to the mass audience, or are they more artsy and highbrowed?
I'm judging this based on the quality of the work. And in this case, the quality of the work isn't here. Transformers 4 is an extremely accessible film, but it's not necessarily a good film.
Right. I'm just saying, are there more artsy Transformer movies that are less accessible? You know what I mean? Like, when you take a topic, right, I don't want to use the wrong words, but like, if you make it as accessible as you can by appealing to the lowest common denominator of audiences. That gives you a better jumping on point versus a movie, you know, like Nymphomaniac or something that is much less accessible and harder for the average audience goer to sort of connect and operate with. You know what I mean? I just think this one probably has a little more, I guess, mass appeal. And
I won't argue that at all. Like I mentioned, this is pulp. This is pulp, and pulp serves a purpose. Pulp by definition isn't bad, and it's often very accessible, very digestible, very easy for the masses to digest. But just because something is easy for the masses to digest doesn't necessarily mean that it's good. And I'm using, you know, I'm just judging the quality of the film itself, and the quality of the film isn't there for me.
All right. Well, what about you, Fresh Prince of Leather Hat? What think thee?
The Fresh Leather Prince. Hey, well, I wanted to talk just a tiny bit about our experience in going to see this movie. Will, did you see it in a packed house?
I saw it in a theater that maybe had probably about 4/5 of the seats filled. So yeah,
okay.
pretty
Yeah,
cool.
pretty cool. Yeah, we saw it in a big auditorium, and I wouldn't say it was even half full. Would you? We kind of saw it earlier in the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There were maybe, I don't know, 50, 60 people in there at the most.
Yeah, I'd say about 60. Yeah.
Yeah, and out of those, I actually stood up and counted. There were 4 guys, including us, only 4. So that's like less than 10% were male that went to see the movie. So that tells you a little bit about the what's the word I'm looking for? The
demographic?
The demographic that was in that movie. And of the 4 guys, right, one of them who was sitting in front of us was sitting with what could have been his wife or just a female friend, got up and left like around 5 minutes in and never came back. I have no idea what happened there.
To be fair, it was a little longer than that. It was the first sex scene. I watched him leave. Yeah.
I thought it was kind of early, but I couldn't pinpoint it. But it was just interesting. Yeah, I mean, Will, I'm going to leverage off of some of the things you said. I went into this movie with no expectations. This is a movie that I would not have sought out to see by myself, and the only reason I think we went to see this movie is because it's become a pop culture phenomenon right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Of course, the novel was huge, created a big stir, both negative and positive, and this movie was very much anticipated, and so we decided to, what the hell, let's go see it. I was actually dreading going to see this movie. Like, I had already started to leak some of the reviews of the movie by the time I saw it, and the reviews have been pretty dreadful. I mean, it's down in the mid 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. And again, typically that doesn't hold a lot of stock with me, but when you start hearing a lot of negative stuff, it kind of maybe wears away your excitement a little bit for a movie. And that's whatever little excitement I had for seeing this kind of went out the window. But you know, in the end, I was surprised by this movie, how much I don't know if I can say I enjoyed it, but it was way better, I think, than I expected it to be. And maybe a lot of that had to do with Brad, you telling me how terrible the book was.
And reading excerpts.
Reading excerpts of it from me, and I'm like, oh my God, is this what we are in for when we go to see this movie? I hope not. And I'm like, watching the movie, I'm like, where is all this like really bad stuff that's in the book? Because I'm not seeing it. This isn't great stuff that I'm seeing on the screen, but it's certainly palatable, and you know, in some cases, I thought kind of well done in spots. I'll just say that, you know, I enjoyed it to some degree. I'd probably give it kind of an average rate. I had some problems with this movie, mostly with the depiction of sex in this movie. I loved the way the characters came together. I thought both actors did a really good job. Both Johnson and Dornan, I thought, did a pretty good job. I think a lot of people didn't like Dornan's portrayal of Mr. Grey because he came across as very kind of stilted and wooden early on in the movie. But I think that's by design. I mean, he's a guy who's been stripped of his emotion. I mean, he connects with people strictly on a business level. They sign a contract, they do these things, and that's the way it is. He said it doesn't go on dates. I don't make love, I fuck hard. I mean, and that was the way he connected with people. And I liked the way they portrayed that in him at the beginning. I actually disliked the movie as it went on, as he kind of
Being careful of spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want to spoil too much. We'll get into spoilers, but I loved his character at the beginning, and I toward the end of the movie, I wasn't so much liking his character. Some of the criticisms I've seen, like the movie was too boring. I'm like, well, not for me. I mean, this movie kept me awake the whole time, and I think it was close to 2 hours long. Mm-hmm. That's more I could say for the battle scene in the last Hobbit movie. Like this was not as boring as that was for me. I thought the sex scenes. People talked about the sex scenes being very toned down, and that's a criticism that I actually agree with. I thought the sex scenes was something like you'd see when you were a teenager on midnight cable programs, that softcore porn stuff.
Right.
And now I understand that there's limits that they can do with an R-rated movie, unfortunately. To be honest, I kind of would have liked to see this movie made as an NC-17 movie. Show a little bit more. I didn't think the sex was that exciting, to be honest. I got really excited when we saw the I'll just say the Red Room for now, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, this could get pretty interesting. But it never really did. It never really left that, even when they kind of got into the sex.
Yeah, it kind of brings it back to that issue of accessibility, though. Like, if they had shown more, then, all of the housewives and college girls aren't going to come out and check it out.
Oh, my God. Well,
But it's a fair criticism, It's one of those things.
You got to walk the line. You got to bring the titillating sex to the audience, but you can't cross the line into something that's going to shock them too much, or show them something that's just too scandalous. As you guys said, both of you, I thought the screenwriters did a pretty good job of taking what was the pathetic parts of the book, at least from what I've been told, kind of out of it and made a screenplay that kind of held together for me throughout the movie. They took out some of the bad dialogue. Will, you said you still had some issues with the dialogue. They took out some extraneous characters, I think. I don't know. I think people should see this movie and kind of judge for themselves. I see a lot of people online bashing this movie when 90% of them haven't seen it yet. And that really, really bugs me for anything or any movie. But it's kind of a jump on the bandwagon mentality, and it drives me crazy. People need to get out, see the movie, judge for themselves. If you don't think it's going to be your cup of tea, don't go to see it. But I don't know if it'd be fair for you to go out and bash it. But
yeah, and that's such a salient point to bring up, because we went out to see this movie Friday night,
early evening. Yeah.
Right, Friday night. So I go and see this movie, and I post a picture on my Facebook wall, and I'm like, here we go, poster of 50 Shades. And I had people commenting like, ew, better you than me, or, oh my God, I can't believe you're seeing that, or, oh, that movie is such trash, it's a terrible film. And so I start engaging people in discussion, and they haven't seen the movie. And I'm like, well, then how can you call it trash? How can you say it's, a terrible film? How can,
Right.
And they're like, oh, well, I have friends, and they know.
I read the reviews.
Right. And I'm like, okay, well, I get that, but I mean, inform your own opinion. You know what I mean? I don't know. It grinds my gears too. You know what grinds my gears? I'm kind of the same way, Jim. Going into this film, I was very I'm not super excited. I read part of the book. I tried to divest the book experience from the film experience, because most things, if the book is terrible, if they make a movie version, they usually make it a little better. So going in, I was kind of like, well, I guess we'll see what happens. Total Cougar Town in the theater, by the way. That was fun.
Yep. Soccer Mom Central.
Yep. All they needed was some box wine and French ticklers. Anyway, so I actually ended up liking this film, and that surprised me. I didn't think it was a terrible film. I thought it had some really interesting things that it brought up in terms of, Anastasia Steele. God, that's an awful name. Is this naive, mousy kind of girl who gets, like you said, Jim, drawn into this world, and you kind of see her progression from the mousy girl who doesn't know anything to what we end up with at the end of the movie. And I actually really, really kind of enjoyed her journey. Sex with girls really isn't my thing. I'm sorry, that doesn't excite me. I can't say I was titillated at all in the movie, really. Even Jamie Dornan's nudity, it's not really my cup of tea.
We'll get into that.
Sexually, and we'll talk about that more. But I was more focused on sort of the accessibility of BDSM, I guess, a little bit. And just, it's not something that I know a ton about. I have friends in that world, and, they've kind of told me a little bit. And this movie obviously is not probably the best representation of it. But it's interesting how you can take someone who really is not part of that world at all and, put a hot guy who's into it, it kind of draws them in, and they start to get experience with that. And I don't know, I kind of appreciated seeing what she went through. And I felt like where we end up at the end of the movie, it was a little contrite for me, a little bit. I wasn't a huge fan of the ending. But, I mean, all the hate that I am reading for this movie, I guess I don't get. I guess if you go in with the expectations of the world with you, then, okay, maybe I get it. But for me personally, I mean, I give it like a C plus B minus. I didn't think it was terrible. I didn't think it was great, but I mean, I was certainly entertained.
Yeah, I don't get the criticisms either. I mean, there's one thing to watch this film, and to be able to kind of bring up the point by point the things that we like, we don't like. And for me, the tip of the scale is much more on the don't like than the like scale. But this is not an atrocious film. This isn't the worst thing ever. This is already making some worst of lists, and I'm positive it's for people that haven't actually seen the film.
Right.
Because once you actually see it, like, yes, there to me at least, there were a lot of things that did not work here. But those things were still passably bad. It wasn't like, worst film ever territory. And there were some good things that offset those. And we'll talk about some of those in spoilers too. There's one major thing towards the end of the film that I thought was extremely good that I feel like they're probably going to dismantle in the sequels, just because they're going to be doing sequels. But there was something that I really super enjoyed about the kind of the latter part of this film. But
yeah,
spoiler town there.
Yeah. And one of the, without spoiling it too much, I think one of the things I liked that both characters seem to have an arc going at this point.
Right.
By the end of the movie, this movie really for me was not about. It's not really about sex, because the sex wasn't, like I said, the sex scenes weren't that I don't know, revealing to me or whatever. They weren't that. Exciting for me to watch. They were kind of interesting, but only in a mild way. And it wasn't really about. I don't think it's about romance, at least not in this part of the movie.
No, it's in that category, but it's
about power. This is about power in relationships and how power is used, not just in the Red Room, but I mean power in a relationship. At the beginning of the movie, Gray has all the power against this, as you said, Brad, this mousy, innocent girl who's drawn to him by his success or charisma or whatever you want to put it. And then toward the end of the movie, you can start to see a shift in that, where his power has eroded, and she now has power based on her ability to kind of withhold, I guess, is the question. She kind of holds more power by the end of the movie, certainly, than she had at the beginning of the movie. And I loved the way they kind of played that right. Power exchange thing very subtly, and yeah, for me it worked.
I think one of the big criticisms that's kind of muddying this a bit is, people are like, oh my God, this Christian Grey guy is a horrible dude. He's a major stalker. He's abusing her. This kind of abuse is wrong. It's a terrible movie. Well, is it a terrible movie because a character in the movie is, not doing things that you expect? Is it a terrible movie because he's a character that is abusing her or whatever, or is it a terrible movie because the acting isn't good, or you didn't like the cinematography, or you didn't like the score? Like, is the character what makes it a terrible movie, or is it the story? Like, you know what I mean? Isn't there a delineation there between?
Yeah, I mean, you guys watch comic book movies all the time. There are terrible characters in those movies because they're terrible.
They're terrible people.
They're villains, and this guy was, man. This guy played like a great villain to me for part of this movie. He was kind of trying to overlord everything, and I really liked that about his character, and he played it very well. But that doesn't make movies that have terrible, mean characters bad movies. I like comic book movies that have a really strong, mean character. And I like this movie because it had this guy that kind of came off as a very villainous dude.
And that to me that's a very juvenile, not what you're saying, but like the criticism. It's a very juvenile way of looking at films to think about like, well, there's a character in that I don't like because they're doing bad, reprehensible things.
Right.
So because of that, the film is bad. A great character can be a terrible person. In this case, Christian Grey is not a great person, and I would say that this is not a good representation of BDSM. That's certain. Like, this is not a good textbook example for someone that's like going into this thinking like, will I learn something? Will I learn what it's like to be in the BDSM lifestyle? No, you won't, because that's all about like you mentioned power. It's also very much about control. It's all about being secure with your partner and making sure that there's safe words and there's boundaries and there are limits and that everyone is in a certain amount of control regardless of their dominant or submissive role. That's part of it. And in this case, Christian Grey is a stalker, and he's emotionally abusive. He is not a great dude. So that doesn't mean that it's a bad movie. It just means that it's a bad representation of BDSM.
I would say he's
still be enjoyable to watch.
I would say he's a flawed dude who only knows how to deal with women in this case in a specific manner through this contract. These are what we do. You will agree to what I do, or you won't, or we won't be in this thing. And to me, that was fascinating, the whole idea of the contract. And they did kind of drag it out a little bit in the movie, kind of a little bit too much. Like, will she or won't she, sign the contract? And we'll get into that in spoilers. But
this movie did not need to be over 2 hours long. Like, that's something they could have done. They could have trimmed. They could have trimmed some of that. Will they, won't they out. But I guess at the same time, the will they, won't they is what I guess what the core audience is there to see. So maybe that's a criticism for me, but it's not what the target audience wants. So I don't know.
We said that you may not learn anything watching this movie. I don't know if I had, a dungeon room, I might have learned a few things on how to set it up, maybe.
Well,
I thought that was pretty awesome, but we'll get it again. That's kind of in spoiler territory.
Indeed. Well, speaking of spoiler territory, is there anything non-spoiler wise you guys need to get out before we move on to spoilers?
I wanted to talk a little bit about the score.
Thank you.
I got really excited when I saw that Danny Elfman had scored this movie, but I don't know, Will. I don't know what you thought, but I heard a lot of pop music in this score, like a lot of pop songs and not a lot of score. It was kind of weird for me. Like, every scene, a lot of key scenes seemed to be punctuated by what I thought was like a modern day pop song.
It was probably
I'm like, where is Elfman's score? Like, it seemed to be overshadowed by some of those stronger pop song moments.
I was kind of split on the score. I didn't like what Danny Elfman did with the pieces that he did. I felt like a lot of the music that he used. I know what he did. I know why he did this. A lot of the orchestral pieces were both enigmatic and mysterious and tender at the same time, which is totally like what you're doing to try to pitch, like, a potential romance, to try to set the mood. Like, that's totally what you're doing. But it underscored a lot of different scenes that didn't really need it, so it felt very discordant. I like a score that really matches what's happening in the scene at the exact moment. And it seems like a lot of what Elfman did was just he's like, people are gonna have sex. Let's make some Tinder romantic music and call it a day. So I actually enjoyed the pop music, which I don't know why. I enjoyed the pop music parts of the score better than the actual score itself.
I think that's because they put those pop songs over the more noticeable parts of the movie. Instead, it's kind of like Elfman stepped aside to let the filmmakers put in the pop music when key stuff was happening on the screen, which would normally be supported by a score. Does that make sense?
Yeah, there's this one sequence, not in spoilers, there's a spot in a helicopter. It's one of the only spots in the film that, this is not a very joyful movie. There's not a lot of fun in this movie. It's a lot of kind of knuckle biting and it's not a very, the characters aren't having a lot of fun aside from when they're fucking. But this one scene, they're in this helicopter flying around, and there's this bubbly melodic pop song that played, and it was a fun little distraction. It kind of let me recalibrate. There was also a spot where they used the that kind of toned down version of Crazy in Love, the same one that they used in the trailer, and the sequence they used it with, I thought it worked extremely well. So I like the pop music, and I was not expecting to like the pop music where I did in the score. So 50-50 on the score. I like the pop stuff, but I didn't like the Elfman stuff. Go figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of those things where, I mean, we had some incidental stuff from Elfman, but there wasn't much. You know what I mean? It was very minimal.
Right.
I actually kind of dug some of the pop stuff as well, and usually I'm not a big fan of pop music. But I mean, for a non-Nicholas Sparks romance film, I don't know. It didn't bother me that much.
Yeah, like I said, it was just the fact that Danny Elfman scores are pretty recognizable, and in this movie, I thought it was much less so than normal. Not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it was less noticeable for me. Will, you mentioned that song "Crazy in Love" that was used in a part. I think there was a part that kind of like an instrumental part, score part that kind of led into that song.
Yeah.
That might have been done by Elfman, and I thought that was really well done. I think it was during one of the sex scenes, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so too. One of the more, yeah.
And who doesn't want to have sex to a Danny Elfman piece?
I know, right?
Anyway,
it's a dead man's party.
Oh, my sister is calling. Sorry, sis, I have to decline you. I'm podcasting. Well,
unless she wants to talk about the movie.
Brad, I was on Google and I saw you wearing a harness. What's going on?
Yeah. I just saw this awesome movie.
Get her on the show. No, that'd be the most uncomfortable thing in the world, right?
Oh my God! Is there a way to call somebody from Google Plus? That would be funny.
I think there is actually, but
figure that out. Hey sis, what's up? You read Twilight? This is based off Twilight fan fiction. What do you think? You know what? Let's talk about that for a couple minutes before we move on to spoilers. This book started out as Twilight fan fiction, didn't it?
That it did. It totally did. She was on. So E.L. James had. She wrote it on a Twilight forum, and originally the characters, I believe, were actually named Bella and Edward, and it was all kind of based on the mythos, and I guess it got popular enough that she pulled it down off that forum, changed the characters, changed some of the stuff around to make it, these characters. So originally this was Edward and Bella Swan with some light flogging.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. All right.
And I think that's probably, if we're talking about why people don't like this, Twilight's another one of those things that, I'm not a fan of Twilight. I don't care for it, but I gave him a shot. But I think there are some people that are like, ugh, Twilight, ugh, fuck that. Yeah. And they hear this news and it justifies why they are not going to like this before they even give it a shot. It's one of those things where...
Touché.
Yeah. I really do think people should give this a shot. maybe not in theaters. If you know this isn't going to be your cup of tea, don't give it a shot in theaters. But if you're going to sandbag this film, do it the courtesy of at least seeing it first.
Jim, would you recommend people go see this?
I would. I'd recommend people go see it and make up their own minds. I think it's not going to blow your socks off, as far as groundbreaking cinema, but I think it's a solid story, and I think it's got some interesting relationships, specifically power dynamics in the characters. That alone kept me interested. Again, it wasn't really the sex scenes, which I'm kind of raring to talk about in spoilers, but yeah, I would recommend. It's a mild recommendation for me, but I would recommend it.
Yeah, I'm going to echo that. Mildly recommendational. I think it's definitely worth. If you want to be part of the conversation and actually know what the fuck you're talking about, then pay your $7.50 and go see a matinee this weekend. I think it's decent. Who knows? You might like it, or maybe you're afraid of discovering your inner submissive or dominant. Is that what it is?
I don't think that's. I don't think that's it.
You never know.
I think it's more bandwagon. I think
Probably.
that's why people don't like it.
Very possible.
Yeah. So it sounds like we've got 2 minor recommendations and 1 minor.
Probably
don't
minor,
see it. But it sounds like we're maybe not too far off. We're not raving about it, but we're not getting the pitchforks.
Exactly.
And I'm only what seems like raving about it to kind of defend it against a lot of what I see as maybe a little bit of unfair criticism.
Hey, I'm biting my underlip.
You biting your lip.
Biting my lower lip.
Eyes down. Eyes down.
And I'm positive, we're talking about this as a Twilight fan fiction. I'm positive that's something they got left in from, because that's something that Kristen Stewart kind of famously does in Twilight. Wow. So I'm sure that's actually an artifact of that.
Oh, I'm positive that it is. Yeah. All right. Well, here we go. Spoilers are officially fair game. Man, we've got a bunch of people hanging out with us tonight, and only a couple have given any comments. WTH, guys, make your voice heard.
They haven't seen it, and they want to know whether they should go check it out or not.
Comments, people, or you get the jackhammer. Or maybe you guys want the jackhammer.
Jackhammer.
So Will,
Will's thing.
Someone asked earlier, Will, why the fuck you have that thing? And I feel you deserve a chance to make it known.
Yeah, so for those of you listening, this is a giant, what is this, like a 12, 13-inch, ginormous black dildo that I've got. Several years ago, and I had the fortune of being one of the early adopters on that thing they call marriage. And afterwards, all of my straight friends were like, it kind of sucks that you've been at some of our bachelor parties, but we haven't been to yours, so we're going to throw you a bachelor party. And this was way after the fact. This was a year later. So they got a limo, and we all went out to dinner. But they had this little bag of just bullshit, and in it is kind of this giant black dildo. And so what was impressive about it was I then had to ask my straight friends, well, where the hell did you guys get this giant black dildo from? And yeah, they said we lived in an area at the time that did not have like sex shops nearby. So they told me about they had to drive an hour to find a sex shop.
Wow.
That had this giant black dildo just so they can get it for the.
That's because the people in Austin are so freaky. They were always sold out.
Well, this was before Austin. This is before I moved here.
Okay.
Now they give them out here actually. You go to any street corner and just say, "Hey, I'm looking for my dildo," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I got it for you. Here you go."
They're gonna be in our South by goodie bags.
They have little dispensers. You just put $1.50 in. Out comes a dildo. Out comes a butt plug. Whatever you want. So now I keep this. If you ever come and stay at my house, I keep this in my guest room, just sitting there as a conversation starter.
Well, I didn't see that. I didn't see that when I was staying in your guest room.
I think I put it away, Jim, just because I was afraid. I was afraid.
Afraid what I think.
With it. Yeah. No, I was afraid you use it.
So Will, when we record on location at your house in a few weeks during South by, we'll be able to see it in person. Sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even
absolutely.
touch it. Even touch it.
It is right. And this thing is sturdy too. Again, like hanging out with all of my straight friends, they would immediately, as soon as they gave it to me, we had a bunch of alcohol that night because bachelor party, and it turned into them using this as a club to hit each other. It was the weirdest fucking thing. Straight people are weird. I love my straight friends, but holy crap, guys.
Boundaries.
They turn into 9-year-old boys.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, for real this time. Spoilers, they're happening. Get used to it. If you do not want to be spoiled on the plot of 50 Shades of Grey, now is your time to gracefully slink away and return in about 20 minutes, maybe-ish, for plugs, because don't miss those. They're awesome. They're not butt plugs.
I have an awesome
They're still
one.
pretty good.
Definitely come back for mine.
Yes, for sure. But, Jim, you said you were raring to talk about the sex scene, so why don't you kick us off in regards to spoilers?
Yeah, the sex scenes in this movie for me were quite underwhelming, I guess, for a number of reasons. One, I thought it was, like I said earlier, very much like the old Cinemax late night softcore porn. You really
Like the Red Shoe Diaries.
Yeah, like
absolutely.
Like, they'd have the music. I mean, the music wasn't as cheesy, obviously, but you have. It seemed like there was some, soft. The lighting was very very artistic, and there's a lot of you see a lot of her, a lot of boobies in this one. You even get to see a little bit of her pubic hair, right, in her area down there. Assuming that was real and not a body double, I don't really know. You get to see them kind of. You get to see him from the rear. You get to see his butt quite a bit and her butt. But again, we have this double standard in movies where we don't get to see any male parts really. We might have saw just a tiny piece of just the very base of his manhood in one scene.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that scene, Brad?
Let me pull it back up again. I love the screen share. It works really good on Mac. It did not work very good on Windows, but now I'm using it. So this scene is from when they've had sex for the first time, and the next morning, like, she has to take a shower.
Oh, yeah. And, this is when they were, like, pretend playing house?
Yeah, and so he, follows her in. He's, staring at her in the mirror, and her robe falls, and we see her butt, and then she, bends over to, turn on the water, and we see more of her butt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is where, I hate this part. Oh, I kind of like this. No, I hate this. Yeah.
I didn't like it, but I'm glad you did.
But I mean, but the movie, sets this up as, all right, this sex is going to be really hardcore. We didn't get to really see any hardcore sex. We saw a few slaps. We saw one scene near the end, and we can talk about that a little bit, that was kind of brutal, and I'm not exactly sure what I actually saw in that scene, or what they were trying to do in that scene. But, like I said, the sex was just very, very soft. I mean, at the beginning of the movie, he says, I don't make love. I fuck, and I fuck hard. We never got to see that. I mean, we saw them effectively doing it, but where was the hard fucking? I didn't see that.
Actually, we did.
Did we?
We did. So the first time they have sex, they make this big deal out of showing him from behind with his butt muscles clenching as he's pounding into her. But we see it for a split second before the camera goes up, and then we're looking at a mirror above the bed, and we're watching kind of hazy as he's jackrabbit fucking her from behind. And it was kind of hard. I mean,
it sounds like to me that Brad and Jim have definitions of hard fucking. Go on.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't see it. Brad said he saw it. I don't know.
I mean, from top to bottom, it was not consistent.
It looked more like tender lovemaking, and he was showing her at that point in the movie, he was taking her virginity, right? This was the first time she'd ever been, she'd ever had sex with a guy, right? So I assumed that he was taking it easy on her. I didn't see any of the hard stuff. And certainly later on, I didn't see much of that either. We saw a lot a lot of sexual play that might be considered a little kinky, but you know, there were certainly some things that are usually part of sex between a man and a woman that we never saw in this movie. We never saw any oral sex performed on him, or even close to that. I don't think, right? No.
Yeah, nothing on.
And I don't know if that's because there's certain things you can't do in these movies. I don't know.
I think that's because, I mean, he had a big thing about not wanting to be touched. So I don't think that that's something that he wanted. You know, I don't think that's his thing. His thing isn't like, give me a blowjob, which I totally disagree. Blowjobs are awesome.
Yeah.
But his thing was being in the power position to use the toys to tell her what to do, and then at the end with her bound or face down or something, you know, him then, you know, bringing it home. But I think that, you know, kind of his hang-ups about being touched probably would have been triggered by her kind of invading that space.
So book spoilers. Are you okay with book spoilers?
Oh yeah, go for it.
So she has to like practice her oral skills on him. Like he makes her an expert. Yeah. So I think the movie just didn't show it. The only reason I mention that is because like Blue Valentine got an NC-17 rating because Ryan Gosling is like going down, you know, simulatedly on what's her face, poor man's Carey Mulligan, or was it Carey Mulligan? I forget.
It was Carey Mulligan.
It was Carey Mulligan. Anyway, that's awful. Sorry, Brad. But so they got an NC-17 rating for that, right? But Jamie Dornan's able to kind of go down on Dakota Johnson, and apparently it's fine. But I wonder if there had been simulated like female on male oral sex, if that would have pushed it over that line somehow.
It probably would have come fairly close, and that's you know if that's where it is in the source material, and I obviously didn't get that far, then perhaps that it. I was just trying to I was just kind of left filling in the gaps because like Jim, you know, it is weird that wasn't something that was there, and I thought, well, it makes sense if he has this hang-ups, but yeah, maybe it's just for ratings purposes.
Yeah. Maybe they're just trying to avoid that NC-17. I don't know.
And, you know, maybe this is... You look at the target audience, you know. The target audience of this movie was probably, you know, from a marketing standpoint, they're probably looking at a mostly female audience, right? So what are you going... You know, does a shot of a girl giving a blowjob to a guy, is that necessarily what they want to see, or would they rather see... more of the experiences that she's experiencing, because these types of stories, you know, the Bellas from Twilight, the Anastasia from 50 Shades of Grey, a lot of these characterizations are usually done in such a way so that the characters are a little bit light, but can serve as avatars for the audience, so they can project themselves into those experiences and kind of live vicariously through the characters. So that could be part of it as well. I think there's probably several reasons why you're not going to see something like that, and that's I would say that's part of the formula.
Could be.
Possible. That's possible. What did you guys make of the very ending of the movie? I've heard that it ends. Are you guys okay with book spoilers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've heard that it ends exactly the same way that the book ends, pretty much.
Oh, really?
The first book, yeah. Definitely ends on a cliffhanger, right? With her actually having turned the tables on him.
She has the power.
Right? Yep. I didn't quite understand what happened with the scene right before that in the dungeon, where she asked him to show her what, I don't know. She asked him to do something. He does it. She gets hurt and leaves. So I don't think she thought he was going to do it.
Yeah.
My thinking is that her line of thought was, I've got him to go on dates with me. We've gone flying and gliding. We're going out to movies.
So romantic.
Romance is in bloom. There's no way he's going to go hardcore, like dominant on me and go all like 12 Years of Grey. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think she thought he would do that. And sorry, 12 Years of Grey. It's fitting, right? I mean,
kind of.
So he's
different context, though.
He's smacking the hell out of her with this belt, harder and harder and harder. And, you know, the power dynamic is interesting because she's the one directing him to do it.
Right.
But I almost felt like she was setting him up for failure. Almost to, like, put him in
to put him in a submissive
a
power position.
no-win situation.
Right, absolutely.
Right.
That's exactly it. So
like
this
if you beat me like I'm kind of almost expecting you to do, then you're an asshole.
Right.
And if you don't beat me, then you're closed off to me, and you're an asshole.
Right.
So it was kind of a difficult scene for me. Of course, it's difficult to see somebody get beaten like that. I wasn't sure what her thinking was. Obviously, I don't think she enjoyed it. She never tried to use a safe word during that scene. I want it to be made clear, because one of the criticisms I've heard and seen from people who, again, have not fucking seen the movie say, well, I heard that he abuses his power and doesn't obey safe words when we're playing, and that's unacceptable to me. Nobody should. And then they go off on this huge, moralistic argument about how the movie is, like advocating violence against women and blah 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 blah. But I never saw any of that. I mean, he was pretty clear from the get-go that says, if you don't want to do this, we don't do it. And even though the contract wasn't signed, it was pretty clear that he said, if you tell me to stop, if you use these safe words, it's over, it's done. I don't get any pleasure out of doing it to somebody who isn't fully invested in it.
So going back to your previous point, like I disagree that she put him in a no-win situation, because there was an outcome that she wanted, and it all goes back to the imbalance in their power here. She is not attracted to the BDSM lifestyle. That is not something that she enjoys. What she's attracted to is Christian Grey. Right. Christian Grey is the one that's attracted to these things. So all through the film, what she's doing is she starts off in this very vulnerable position. He's in this very strong power position, and she stays in that very vulnerable position because she's constantly giving more and more and more of herself to him. Okay, I'll try this thing. I don't want to do this contract. Okay, I'll consider the contract. Okay, I don't want to do this thing. Okay, go ahead and flog me. She's making a lot of concessions, not because she wants to do these things. She's doing them because it'll make him happy. So when we get to that scene right there, she's testing him. What she's hoping for is that he's going to say, you know what? I love you too much to hurt you.
Exactly.
If that had happened, she would have said, thank you, Christian Grey, and they would have rode off on a steed on the beach. But that's not what happened, because he's a very troubled man who has these hang-ups, some of which were hinted at here, some of which we'll probably explore later on in the series, because it feels like we were just kind of scratching the surface in terms of his experiences with Mrs. Robinson and all of that. But he's got a past. He's got some things that make him express himself through sadism. That final sequence I mentioned in the pre-spoiler section, there was something that I absolutely loved about this film, and it was that very last moment. And the reason for it is, to me, I didn't feel like it was a cat and mouse in terms of power. I felt like it was always very tipped scale. He would constantly do stuff, and she would constantly give in to him. He would show up randomly where she was at, and instead of saying, like, dude, you can't do that, she would say, hey, Mom, go away for a minute, and I'm going to go ride around with this Christian Grey stuff, guy. She constantly gave in to him. And at the very, very, very end of the film is when she realized that they're not compatible. And that's what I enjoyed so much. This is a romance film that didn't end with an overly idealized version of romance. This ends with kind of the harsh reality that, like, what he wants and what she wants are two totally different things. And I feel like, like I said, there wasn't to me like a cat and mouse game of power, but at the very end she realized that there was an imbalance, and she regained her power there at the end. Now, problematically, we know that there's going to be more of these things, so it feels like what's going to end up happening is any of that strength and any of that, like, I've reclaimed myself, is going to get shot in, and again, I know nothing about the follow-up books, but if we're going to have two more stories of Anastasia and Christian Grey doing stuff, at some point she's going to go back and give in to his bullshit some more. That's problematic, because it feels like it hurts what happened here.
I think you're right. Well, I think to a point, I think you're right. I think the power dynamic started out like this, and I think over the course of the movie, it slowly inched its way. because there were things she did. Even in that, I thought the negotiation scene they had.
Oh my God,
awesome.
that was my favorite part of the whole movie.
That was awesome.
I love
She exerted some power in that scene. She
Yep.
had the contract in front of her, and she was negotiating things for her sake, for her relationship wants and needs, over his, and won.
Right.
To me, that's closing the power gap.
And she's agreeing to submit to him ostensibly, but it's on her terms. So she's keeping the power even as she's, or even embiggening the engorgement of her power.
But she's still agreeing to things. She's still agreeing to things she doesn't want to do, or things that she's not interested in.
And he is
she's
too.
Just agree, but
Date night?
Because
Date
it's
night?
a matter.
He doesn't date.
He doesn't date.
It's a big list of different items, and they're striking things, you know? So what he's agreeing to is less of the things that he wants, and she's agreeing to several of the things that she doesn't want to do. So there's still an imbalance there.
Well, but I don't think we know that. I don't think that we know that. Remember, she's mousy. She's new. She doesn't know what's in this world yet, so she's considering things that she'll try. It's not that she doesn't want to be hit with a riding crop. She's not been hit with one yet. She doesn't know what it's like. You know, maybe she's agreeing to try it. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's like when someone asks if they want to spank your ass with a tennis racket. If you're not like, oh my God, that's the most horrible thing ever, but you're also not like, wow, that sounds amazing, might you not agree to let someone try it on you, even if you're...
But based on what we saw in this movie, like that I mean, that's a totally a fair point. But based on what we saw in this movie, these weren't things that she sought out and that she was excited about. These were things that she did because she wanted Christian Grey. These are things that these were basically, these weren't things that she sought out because she enjoyed them. These were sacrifices she made on his behalf.
I agree.
That's what I'm saying. Like, he
100%.
always held the power until she snatched it at the end. That's
agree.
the point I'm
I agree, but there are things that she wanted that he did not want that she ended up getting.
Right. His
through that
power
negotiation.
was constantly eroding. The going flying thing from a fucking like Nicholas Sparks romance movie, you know what I mean? Like, that was not something that he would do with just like some normal woman he had a contract with. Going to movies, you know what I'm saying? Like, he's agreeing to do romantic things with her that he knows she wants because he gets her as part of it. It's the same kind of dynamic, and the more they went through these things, especially that negotiation scene, I actually thought that's where the power kind of equalized, and
No.
to some degree.
I think it was equalizing, but I don't think it was quite there yet. To Will's point, at the end of the movie, she had the ultimate power by walking out.
That's the thing. Like, I'm not going. There were certainly concessions that he made too, but until that final moment in the film, he was in control of the entire film. That's my point. Like,
how about?
And to the film's credit, like, I'm not saying this is a knock against the film. This is a film not like you mentioned in the pre-spoiler section, Jim. This is a film about power. And when, while she did some things to try to regain some of her power, the only time she realized there at the very end that the only way she could really regain her power was to walk away from what she considered a toxic situation, or what she realized was not the right thing for her. And that's what I'm saying about it. And again, it's a good thing. I like that final sequence because it was a good payoff to that imbalance.
So now the thing is, we'll have to see in the second installment. Here's the thing, right? Talking about this movie that only got 20-something% on Rotten Tomatoes, that it's spurring this kind of passion discussion, and I think that's good. I think that's the strength of this movie. This movie has some things to say that can be interpreted in different ways, and I think that's a credit to the movie for all of us. And at the end, it remains to be seen if they're going to have some kind of reconciliation. Maybe she's going to realize she shouldn't have shut down totally. Maybe she's going to feel like, well, maybe letting him beat me like that at the end was not the right way to get what I think I want out of this relationship. And he's probably gonna question, like, oh, maybe I think I took it too far. Right. I probably should have read the signs and just stopped.
Right.
And, and so we'll have to see what happens. I don't know going forward if the movie can or the franchise can maintain this kind of power struggle, or if it just morphs into something else totally. I don't know.
So, live comment from Ryan Rivera, who says, A sequel would likely be a reverse dynamic where perhaps psychologically she will have power over him. Uh, that totally makes sense to me. You know what I mean? It seems like they're setting it up so that the second book is probably all about him trying to like get her to reconcile, and maybe there's going to be more of him making sacrifices to be on the level that she's at, and then I'm guessing the third one will be both of them will be, you know, in this middle ground place where they
bringing other couples into their red room.
You know, but this movie was interesting to me personally because, like, watching her go through this process, especially in the negotiation scene where she's deciding like what she'll try versus what is like way off the table, I think about like my own development, and like early on, I mean, there are things that I do now, I'm not going into detail, sorry, but there are things that I will do now that absolutely terrified me back when I was shiny and new. But I had a willingness to maybe overcome my initial fear and try them. You know what I mean? And I ended up developing a love for those things, and now they're things that I really relish, and I kind of like the power that those things bring me now. And so I'm totally like seeing her as she's going through this. I'm wondering if she's not going to become a dominant herself by the end of this cycle somehow.
Well, if you think about it, that's how he became a dominant, right? He was. Will's right. They only kind of scratched the surface on his backstory, but apparently he ended up being introduced to this world by a much older woman when he was underage, 15, and brought into this illegally, apparently. But you know, he started out as a submissive, and now he's a total dominant. So maybe the same thing will happen to her. Who knows?
Yeah. I just think in a puritanical society like ours, it's kind of refreshing in a way to see a movie like this that's maybe not one of the higher brow, more high-minded Shia LaBeouf sex movies that has more mass appeal, that is more accessible, and gets people to maybe think outside of their comfort zone and consider ideas that, you know, maybe just at first blush you'd be like, oh my fucking god, there's no way that I could ever, you know, watch a movie about that. You know what I mean? I love that it's spurring the discussion and it's getting people to think in ways that are not comfortable to them. I just wish more people would actually see the movie before they talk about it instead of, you know,
prejudging it.
Yeah, exactly.
I want the happy medium to come out, and I don't know what that film is going to be, because I do enjoy that this is spurring conversations about female sexuality that have been very, very absent. You know, that's a huge, you know, that's a huge thing, and that's a huge feather in this film's cap. I wish the film was better. I wish there was an accessible yet really good film that does the exact same thing, and that's, you know, that's on my wish list. Santa, that's what I want. I want female sexuality in a mass appeal form, and I want it to be like really awesome too. Like I want.
And you can show a little male sexuality too. Wouldn't hurt.
You know what? Show everyone just sexuality all over this thing.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. You know, we talk about Nymphomaniac. You know, that's like a 5-hour-long piece.
Yeah.
And it explores very much like you know, a very It explores some kind of heavier territory along with it, you know, and Duke of Burgundy, which I talked about before. You know, that is great for female sexuality, but it's also two women in Britain exploring things, and that's not going to appeal to the masses. So I like that we have some films here that we can say check these things out, because there are films about this now, or there's not enough. And again, I'm still waiting for that one that kind of does both things.
Right.
One more thing I want to mention before I know we're getting a little long here, but
yeah.
Back to the sex scenes. I don't believe I saw an orgasm in this.
She had orgasms.
Did she have? I know she was doing a lot of moaning as soon as he touched her at the beginning, but I don't know. I don't. It didn't come across to me, no pun intended, as a full-on orgasm. Certainly, we never saw him have one.
They faded at the very end of a lot of sex
sequences. They fade out of it, just like they did in the Cinemax, you know, softcore stuff. They kind of go on to the next scene. You know?
I think she had implied orgasms, like they were heading that way, and they cutting away from the the fruit gusher money shot. You know what I mean? Like
I don't need to see
God.
I don't need to see fluids exchange. That's not what I'm getting at. I just there's something erotic for me about people,
Climax.
experiencing an orgasm as opposed to just constant moaning. So I don't know.
One thing I think would have been really cool is if they kind of took some risks visually with some of the stuff that that the book plays with a little bit. Like in the book, when Anastasia Steele has an orgasm, it talks about how like the world shatters around her in like a prismatic like rain of shards,
Oh my.
But I thought it would have been interesting. Like the movie is totally from her perspective, right? Like it would have been kind of neat to have some of that visual stuff that they play around with in terms of metaphors in the book kind of play out a little bit visually.
They did a tiny bit. There was a scene early in the movie, like right after she met him, and I think she gets in the car, and I don't know if she sees him or she's thinking about him, but it starts to rain, and the water's starting to drip down the window. I mean, that was very subtle, but I thought it was a bit metaphorical. But I know what you mean. A little bit more of that might have been okay.
Yeah, definitely.
Supplement. If you know that there's some problems with the source material itself, you can supplement style and use that to kind of overcome some of those. So if you've got you use some visually cool tricks to play off of her emotional state. Sure. I'm good with that.
I mean, instead of a fade when she's about to orgasm, you know what I mean? You can have the screen like crack apart and rain down or something. I mean, maybe that's a little cheesy, but I mean, there are some visual things you could have done beyond just like a crossfade or something. You know,
they should do like the I don't know if you guys remember the Naked Gun movies, those parody films. And whenever there was a sex scene, there would be like a little cutaway to like a train going through a railway track or like an oil derrick or something like that. An eruption. That's what they should have done.
That would have been great.
Kind of like the smokestack falling down in reverse, so it's going up.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I feel like we could get another hour's worth of conversation out of this, and I think that's awesome that this movie generates so much discussion. Jim doesn't really think it's an hour, judging by his face. He's like, yeah, maybe 20 minutes. Sorry, I'm judging your facial expression.
Yes, you are.
But we have been running a little long in the tooth, so are we good with moving on to plugs?
Yeah.
Will, what's a plug?
I would tell you, but plugs are something you should already know about. All right. Well, Jim, what is your plug this week? What you got?
I saw a few movies this week, and as much as I kind of enjoyed 50 Shades of Grey, there's another movie I saw just yesterday, actually, and Brad, unfortunately, you didn't get to see this one with me, but maybe we'll see it later. It's a film called Mommy. It's a film it was released last year, and it's just now getting its limited release in some cities. I'm sure it's probably there in Austin, Will, somewhere. If we have it, you probably have it. It won the jury prize at Cannes this year. It's called Mommy. It's about a really tumultuous relationship between a mother and son. It's made by let me see if I can pronounce this right. Xavier Dolan, who is he's like 25 or 26 years old. He's already got 5 feature films that he's made and released, which is like astounding to me how somebody 26 years old can put out, 5 motion pictures and win the Cannes Jury Prize. I've been watching a lot of his movies. I've watched 4 of the 5 so far, and really wanted to see this one. It's got a lot of buzz. It's about, again, it's this emotionally troubled, often violent 16-year-old son, and the movie kicks off when he goes back home to live with his mom, who's widowed, and it's a very raw, emotional, over-the-top movie, very visually stunning. The acting in here is amazing. I'm trying to remember. Anne Derval is one of the actors in here. Just amazing performances. I don't know. A lot of critics talked about when the Oscar nominations came out how this movie and some of the performances in it got snubbed, even out of the. Some people thought it might be nominated for Best Picture, but at least for Best Foreign Picture, and it got neither. Nor did any of the acting performances get nominated. But it's nominated in like 16 categories in the Canadian, the equivalent of the Canadian Oscars. I would recommend it. If you guys get a chance to see this, go out and see it. It's one of those movies that kind of sticks with you and hits you in your gut and you think about for days and weeks afterwards. Go out and see it. It's called Mommy by Xavier Dolan.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm bummed I couldn't see it. Stupid work.
Well, if you do want to see it, Brad, you and I talked about like how I've been watching a lot of these we call them French smoking movies, because like in these movies for some reason there's a lot of smoking. In this one there's still smoking. It's not quite as much. But yeah, if you ever want to see this one, I would gladly see it again.
All right, awesome. Well, my plug this week, one of my favorite movies of last year, and just in time for the Oscars, The Theory of Everything is coming out on Blu-ray on February 17th, which is Tuesday. We're recording on a Monday night, so if you're listening on iTunes, it's Wednesday. It's already been out for 24 hours. Go, Redbox this if you don't feel like buying it. I think it's a great movie. Definitely worth your time. I think it's easily the best performance I've ever seen from Eddie Redmayne, especially after seeing Jupiter Ascending.
Yeah.
That's saying a lot.
Yeah, of the two performances, yeah.
I know, but it's an awesome movie. It's definitely worth a Redbox at the very least, and just in time for the Oscar discussion. So check it out. That's all I got. Will, what's your plug?
This was a hard one this week because a lot of things hit over the course of the last week or two. There's the new SpongeBob movie, which is actually really funny and worth your time, and then there's The Last 5 Years, which is the Anna Kendrick based on the Broadway musical that's out on in some theaters and on demand, also worth your time. But I'm focusing instead on a film that I was not expecting to like at all, and I ended up loving, and that's Kingsman: The Secret Service. Full disclosure, I saw the trailers for this, and I thought, well, that's going to be a stupid movie. But we ended up going and seeing it just because, what are you going to do tonight? Let's go see Kingsman. And so far, it is this year's John Wick for me. Just an over-the-top, crazy, fun action film that is way better than I thought it would be. Colin Firth is quite good in this. In fact, there's an action sequence in this. It's kind of infamous right now on social media, the church scene. It is one of the best choreographed fight scenes I've seen in a movie in a long time, and it's Colin Firth in it, so go figure. This is directed by Matthew Vaughn. This is a guy that we've seen in X-Men, X-Men First Class and the Kick-Ass films. So this is a guy that knows how to do action films. It's not a super in-depth story. It's very surface level. We talked about pulp quite a bit with the 50 Shades of Grey review. This is a pulp kind of James Bondy style action thriller. But it's quite good. It does what it's supposed to do quite well. So if you're looking for something fun and action-packed at the theaters, check out Kingsman: The Secret Service.
Very good. Hey, interesting point. You mentioned Kick-Ass. Was it Kick-Ass from the director of
Matthew Vaughn?
Matthew Vaughn? Yeah. The director of 50 Shades of Grey. Her name, that's a female, is Sam Taylor Johnson. She is married to Kick-Ass himself, Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Oh,
really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The more you know.
I know. Just reminded me when you said Kick-Ass. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. They've been married a couple years, and we should have mentioned it before that we don't see a lot of mainstream movies made by. I mean, we had Selma by DuVernay recently, but beyond that, we don't have a lot of mainstream movies that are directed by women. And 50 Shades of Grey is one, so that's worth mentioning.
Written by a woman, directed by a woman, and screenplay written by a woman. Mm-hmm. So a lot of women in that movie. Hear her roar. All right, not sure what we're doing for next week yet. Who knows? Maybe it'll be Kingsman, but we'll talk about that. Thank you so much for all of you who hung out with us tonight. Glad you guys could be part of the discussion. For those of you who chimed in with your thoughts, for those of you who didn't, don't be shy, Anastasia Steele. Be powerful, sexually emboldened, Anastasia Steele. And give us your comments. Give us your thoughts. Anyway, we'll see you all next week. Take it easy. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.